Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the intersection of cannabis, the capital markets, and culture. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg of KCSA Strategic Communications speak with the CEOs, financial experts, cultural icons, legislators, and generally interesting people moving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Ann and Louis are speaking with Shea Alderete, the CEO and co-founder of Gen X Biosciences, a cannatech firm focused on using innovative technology and scalable extraction methodologies to deliver premium cannabis products. Shea is one of the truly OGs of the cannabis industry and has worked with some of the most well-known brands in the space like Moxie and HTH, where he set innovative standards for cannabis extraction and paved the way for their success. Now, as the head of his own company, Shea is focused on revolutionizing cannabis and the extraction process in order to provide clean medicine and high-quality extracts to cannabis users. Don't sit back, lean forward. Now on to our interview with Shea Alderete.
Welcome to The Green Rush. Today, I get to do something that's really cool, which is, as opposed to recording with my little jar of joy and Donahoe, I get to record with Nick Opich, my buddy who sits not so far from me here in New York City. Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm back. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, look, you are our producer, and it's just like listening to sports radio. There's the guy who produces the sports radio show, and when one of the hosts can't show up, that producer swings and fills in, and that's you today.
I know. I get to listen to all these episodes before everybody else does, so I always get the inside peek, but now I get to actually be behind the microphone. I'm talking, and we got a great guest on today, one of my favorite guys in the space with Shea Alderete coming up in a little bit.
From Gen X Biosciences. But you know, since last you were on, the industry has seen some major changes. We saw the Canopy deal with Acreage Holdings. We saw the Verano deal, and then we are recording today on May 1st. What did we see today?
Well, May 1st, we had the Cura Partners was purchased today by Curaleaf for just under $1 billion. And for those not familiar with Cura Partners, they had the Select brand underneath their umbrella. They're one of the most popular oil distributors across Oregon and California, and now with the added footprint of all the Curaleaf infrastructure, these guys are getting ready to just go across the country, and we just see more and more of these big deals happening. I know we got like the Forefront Cannex one is one that's getting ready to close up soon.
Love that.
Right? It's I think this is something we had talked about in December. I think might have even been the last time I was on. Is that this wave of consolidation is something that we're going to see in 2019, and it's been totally
just accelerating. Yeah, for me, I think that one of the coolest things about the Select deal is that Select is both a brand itself. So when you go into a dispensary on the West Coast, you can buy Select oils, and then you can also see them as a white label oil manufacturer, and that is 100% relevant to what we're going to be talking to Shea about, because Gen X has the same type of thing. It's, they are their own brand, and you can walk into a dispensary like Exhale in West Hollywood and see the Gen X oils, and then they're also providing oils to other market participants. So I'm excited, and Shea, full disclosure, is not only a client of ours, but has become a really good friend, and he is an authentic player in the space and the definition of an OG. I mean, he's been around this for a very long time.
Yeah, there's few. We obviously talk and work with a lot of people in the cannabis industry, but I think we like to save that term OG for those people that really were in it at the ground level, making all the different connections that now we're seeing are getting a lot of attention. Like Shea was there in the early days of Moxie and HTH. He knows the guys at Tokyo Smoke. He really helped them out as well. And he's maybe not somebody that a lot of the people in the industry have heard up until this point. Like now he's starting to get out there as they're going through their own RTO process. So Shea's somebody that everybody's going to need to know soon. So it's exciting for us to be able to kind of have that first crack at him.
Yeah, and when we close out this episode and we go, that's one take, Shea, one take, different Shea.
Yeah, two different Shays, not our normal program director.
All right, so let's get on to our conversation with Shea Alderete, the CEO and founder of Gen X Biosciences. All right, man. Shea, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks a lot, Lewis. I appreciate you guys having me on this podcast, and look forward to our conversation.
So you're the CEO, the founder of Gen X Biosciences, which is, one of the best extraction companies working on the West Coast today. And you've worked with some of the most well-known brands and help shape their success when it comes to extracts. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of like how you actually extract the oils from the plant, how did you get into the space? What's your story? Like, who are you?
It's funny, Lewis, man. I'm what you call a jack of all trades, man. I've really had a very vast network and a very vast background. Not to go too deep into everything, but I've, been really influential in the action sports industry. I was an ex-athlete as well. I played professional baseball and have endured many injuries over baseball. And along that time, I started realizing the alternative medicine and the alternative form of, marijuana. During those years, I realized, all my teammates were out there slamming tequila shots and drinking beer and alcohol. And it was after the game that I realized that, smoking my joint and self-medicating, it was really where I, started to understand like the true medicinal benefits of cannabis. And along those ways, it seemed there's a lot that I bring to the table that a lot of people don't know about me, with working in the action and sports industry, being affiliated with brands like Lost, O'Neill, starting brands like Metal Militia, who the La Jolla Group and Irvine Company bought out. I was affiliated with a lot of like high profile, high traffic, brands and affiliations prior to before Instagram and before all this, digital space kind of took place. So it's funny. I feel like I've almost lived a life of many lives. And, it's funny. I talked to a few old timers that are in this space and they look at me as the young gun, and I'm starting to look at them as like, I'm almost taking over your seat pretty soon, But, the reality is, Gen X, came to fruition in 2016. It's a biotech in the cannabis space. And, I really set out to really change cannabis from within. I understood that cannabis speaks in many different ways and many elements to many different people. And I just understood that cannabis was a big part of my life, my whole life. I always chose to partake in cannabis versus alcohol. I never would go to parties and get, keg stands. I would go to the party, maybe pass the joint around to one of the friends or so. But, cannabis was always something in my life that it never negatively affected me. It always positively affected me.
How old were you when you started smoking?
I would say I was probably about 13, 14 years old.
And how old are you today?
I'm 34.
So that's a lot of weed, dude.
Been medicating the greater part of my life. Yeah, it's a kind of a lot of weed. You could kind of say I'm a grassroots connoisseur. But along the journey, I think the real topic is like how did Gen X come to fruition? Because that's where we're at today, and Gen X, being an OG in the industry and really having a grassroots, mentality of this industry, building brands like Metal Militia and Affliction and a lot of these other clothing brands allowed me to have a different microscope and a different scope on the vision of what I wanted to build Gen X. And, when we built Gen X, I just wanted it to be very similar to like your iPhone experience. When you open your iPhone, you open the box and it has that perfect amount of puff when it pops off. And it has like the most brilliant, like intro, like almost like little angels came out of the box, right? And you're like, iPhone, and I wanted to create that experience with cannabis. I wanted, when you grabbed a Gen X product, you knew exactly the consistency you were smoking. You knew exactly the product that was in there. You knew it was pesticide free. You knew it was carcinogen free. You knew it was the most quality product you can purchase on the marketplace. And, mind you guys, I did this in an unregulated market in 2016 when I was competing against, I don't need to say names, but like tons of brands out there that were just profiteering off it. And it's great. Don't get me wrong. Let's make our money and let's profiteer. But at some sense, you have to separate yourself as the lone wolf away from the pack, and you have to start leading your own pack. And, that's kind of where Gen X has come to. And, that's a little bit of intro about, my work and what I've done previous.
Yeah, and we'll get further into the Gen X origin story and kind of a deeper discussion on that black market stuff. But I want to jump back real quick to your mention about you're playing in professional baseball. I'm a giant baseball fan. You know this, Shea. Talk about like your experiences playing in the minors. I imagine you were at some of those lower levels. Did you see any kind of cannabis use amongst your teammates? Like, and then how was like the drug testing? I know that the minor league players are under a different contract necessarily because you don't have a union representing you. So how are the drug tests done at that level? And what was the cannabis use like?
It's interesting you say that because, the time I played was in the early 2000s. So, the cannabis in the early 2000s was a different age than it is now. It's very accepting. It's very open now. I'm from LA and Orange County where, you can smoke cannabis outside and it's not frowned upon, As far as a lot of these other states, you go into like the southern states and you go into a lot of these other states where it's not the same, you're very much under scrutiny. And man, guys, I could tell you if I had a quarter for every time I heard a negative comment on what I did for a business and a profession, and it's funny now I see these people coming at me as I'm getting ready to take Gen X public and I'm doing all this wonderful business stuff. They're all at me now. It's like, hey, you got any hot tips or any hot leads?
Yeah, I was gonna say, how much are your former teammates trying to get in on it?
Should have gone in on the ground floor, right?
The A round of Gen X, they would have been making a ton of money, right?
Absolutely. And then you go back. So like, yeah, my fellow teammates, the question was, how did we, you see this stuff back when I was around, they were testing more for like steroids and they were more worried about like performance enhancing products, not what you'd consider performance dehancing if you're medicated. You know what I mean? But the reality is they had no problem giving us, Vicodins and, we had like unlimited supply of ibuprofens and all the like prescription medications we probably wanted. And the reality was, all I needed after a game, was a nice little joint, an ice bath and a nice joint, and I was good. I didn't have to go out and drink and medicate and take pills and all that. And I think, back then it was a little bit of a different time. Nowadays everything's so digital and everything's so fast and everything's at the speed of the light now. Back then I was using a Motorola phone and a Sidekick probably. So, technology has changed us. Yeah, technology's changed us so influential now that, I think the times are a little different. I think, there are a lot of talks that the NFL and a lot of these other, NBA and stuff are starting to maybe allow their players to start using CBD and maybe potentially medicated in the near future. I know there's a lot of talks about that. So, I think we're at the turning of the tide.
We've talked with others who've been former athletes like Eugene Monroe, who was in the NBA, and Marvin Washington, and they've all talked about the need to change the collective bargaining agreements to allow for players who are playing in states where it's legal, either for medical or adult use purposes, to use it. So hopefully that will happen. The NFL CBA up, I think it's
2020.
This next year. Yeah. So,
and then also Eugene Monroe is an NFL player.
Oh, no. I was sorry.
Al Harrington.
Al Harrington.
Yeah,
You're right. Excuse me.
Was the NBA player that we've spoken with. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Al Harrington, he's involved with Viola. I know those guys pretty well.
Yeah, Viola extracts.
Yeah, with Frosty Rucker. He's on the Players Board and Association for the NFL. And we've had few talks with them on the back end because we're under some, we're doing clinical research studies for Gen X, and we have some of our products and some medical devices that we're putting together for the marketplace. And, this is a big passion of mine as well. I'm a fellow athlete. How do I get fellow athletes to be able to medicate the product, and how do I get it into a product that they can actually get a prescription from a doctor? Like, how do I get the doctor to prescribe, 3 puffs of an aerosol technology, water soluble technology that Gen X has? And it's all about creating these products. And this is dives a little bit more deeper into when you started Gen X, how did you start Gen X? The reality is delivery method, guys. Everything is delivery method. If you look at our medical sales now and, there's inhaler technology, there's a few technologies out there where they dispense, an accurate dose. And I think that's the biggest thing that Gen X is really going to pioneer here on is the dosage. Is how do we control dosage, right? How do I let my grandma only take enough that she doesn't get too paranoid or too wigged out, and then she has, there's no such thing as an OD on weed, right, guys? You just get you get too medicated, you fall asleep. But we want to create good experiences. So with that being said, I believe controlled dosage is going to be something here in the near future that, a lot of the brands on the marketplace are switching over from a profiteering brand to more of, a core brand that actually has substance. And I think you're going to see a lot more of those technologies be hitting the marketplace, but it just rounds everything up, like how do I get the doctor to prescribe a Gen X product, right? Well, I got to have a controlled dosage and I got to have a metered device that will allow for that. And then I put that in the medical markets and the recreational markets at the same time. And, we'll let them fight for each other. Obviously there's a big medical market swing here. And, there's a lot of states that are still only medical versus rec. So it allows me to venture off into these other states as Gen X is expanding into these other medical states that are maybe a little bit more microscoped on the THC. And I could then, put clinical research studies from, I'm working with, not to name too many people, but, some big schools here on the West Coast, between the LA, Orange County, and San Diego area. And we're all doing, clinical research studies on CBD, THC, and, just how they work with the endocannabinoid system and the science behind it. Guys, I'm not the science background, but I really put a lot of emphasis on science in Gen X. And, Gen X is really going to bridge the gap between science and culture. And that's kind of like, that's what our motto is,
Bridging the gap between science and culture. I love that. Shea, you just laid a whole bunch of stuff on us to unpack. So I want to unpack just one thing. At your guys' core, you're an extraction company, right? You take the biomass of the plant and you extract, whether it be oils or sauce or resin or whatever. But it is still that oil, the extraction is for the most part combusted. Is that the best way to dose yourself? Is combustion the best because it's a quick uptake, or because when you think about smoking, whether it's vaping or flower, you're still inhaling something and putting it through your lungs. Is that the safest way to ingest?
So you kind of set me up as well, Lewis. You got me on a couple questions here. So yes, I would say, let's look at smoking versus vaping, right? Vaping tends to be a little bit better for you because it has a lot less of a high heating element. So you won't be burning the oils at a higher temperature. So vaping seems to be better there. When, as far as ingesting, there's multiple different ways to ingest cannabis, right? And, some of the technologies that we're working on is a water soluble technology. And that water soluble technology, I'm sure you hear that around a lot in the industry. There's a lot of people talk about this nano emulsion and nanotechnology. It's all very similar, right? And like I said, I'm not the science background, but I can speak a little bit on it on the behalf of what's going on with these products. We're taking science and technology and we're really trying to fast forward the cannabis industry to like neck break pace right now. And the reality is there's pioneers like myself that really push on this envelope of science. How do I better our products via science? How did iPhone, go from iPhone 1 to iPhone 10, right? And it still does the same thing. It calls and texts people, but yet there's so many added features and so many new technologies that have been developed from the iPhone 1 to the iPhone 10. And along that way is, I look at my approach in business very similar. Like, you're right, Lewis, we're an oil producing manufacturer. We produce some of the best distillate on the marketplace and have done it for multiple years now. And a lot of these top 5 brands in the industry are looking to us as the white label contract kings right now, because they know we can produce this quality distillate at such a high level and give it at a commercialized price and be able to scale. Scale is something that's going to be really big for the near future that a lot of companies won't be able to keep up with. Is the commercialization of cannabis. There's so many more people trying to consume the cannabis now because it's not taboo. It's 64 passed, and now everybody thinks cannabis is cool. There's so many more mouths to feed, right? Well, how do you keep that connoisseur?
By the way, cannabis was always cool, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, for the people out there that have passed judgment on cannabis that now think it's cool, you know what I mean? Yeah. There's quite a few of those out there. But, it's kind of like your uncle, right? Everybody's got an uncle that always had his nose up, but he, always drank that whiskey and drove his car drunk every night. Do we sit there and point the finger at him? No, but I want.
Yes. No. If he's drinking whiskey and driving drunk, you're definitely pointing the finger at that guy. I would much rather him smoke than drive and then drink and drive.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not condoning either or, but, you guys get what I'm saying. You never hear of stories of anybody going out to the shed, smoking joint and then coming back and beating their wife. That just doesn't exist. It's not what this drug is meant to be. This is medicine for people. And I think that, along the ways, we're starting to pioneer on like technologies, and these technologies are coming in this industry. And people like myself, a little bit background about myself as well, as I was part of Cloud Vapes, and Cloud Vapes, we've won probably like 12 cannabis awards through High Times through 2012 through 2014. We made that we did extreme revenues with that brand, and we've done really well for ourselves. But along that way it allowed me to understand the technology of vaporizing, understand, the boiling points, the heating technologies, the coils, what to use in the product and what not to use. And I think that's a big deal as, these regulations step in. People aren't going to be ready for the regulated market. And there's a lot of products out there that are being sold that aren't going to meet regulated standards. And I think that's where you're going to see Gen X pull away from a lot of these other brands. And, not only being an oil manufacturing leader, but, we have the Gen X brand in the marketplace out there doing really well as well. And, you'll see a lot of other products powered by Gen X. There'll be a lot of brands that will white label through us. And then on the back of the product, it'll say powered by Gen X. And you'll know they're getting the premium quality distillate and they're getting nothing but the best in their products.
Yeah, and let's expand on that, on what truly makes Gen X unique. You've hit on tech, you've hit on the branding side of things, but I think one thing that a lot of people don't know about what really makes you guys unique in terms of what your extraction process is this idea of molecular perfection. Can you explain for our listeners what is molecular perfection and what it is about your extraction process that makes you different from what's already available on the market from some of your competitors? Like, is your guys' process better? Is it cleaner? Give us some more of that information.
Yeah. I'll talk a little bit about it. Molecular perfection was something we came out with as a water clear. We hit the marketplace in 2016 with water clear distillate, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with water clear. It's the clearest form of distillate you can have. It almost looks like the jar is filled with water, but it's actual distillate. And what that is multiple different steps of chemistry and processing that goes through, and a lot of refinement that goes into the molecular perfection. And not to give out too much of the secret sauce, but that's where our IP is behind. And that was something that we brought to the marketplace to show that, hey man, we are true pioneers of this industry. We are the grassroots. We are, we wanted to be the man in the industry, and we wanted to put out nothing but the best. So we came out with water clear distillate, and that's what the molecular perfection process is. So molecular perfection now is going to be a commercialized product across the board. We're able to, like I go back and talk about like the scalabilization of equipment. That's the biggest deal too. A lot of people don't talk about, the machinery that it takes to make the process happen. And I think that's where a lot of,
Well, talk about the machinery that takes that. I mean, talk about your machines.
Yeah. So, it's kind of like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. He has that unstoppable gobstop maker, right? Look at us having one of those as well. We have a few pieces of equipment that's, all custom made within our facility that, I've literally put about 7 to 8 years worth of my time, effort, sweat, tears into this machinery to allow it to be where it's at. And when I talk about commercialization, guys, there's a big difference between, being that artisanal hobby brand that can win a few awards local, in the city of LA, but then, you want to take this across international and you want to take this across 50 states. You got to be able to have that recipe, be able to translate into other, areas of the world. So that's something that, we've really refined over the last several years. And a lot of it has to do with our equipment, guys. And, some of this equipment is state of the art, stainless steel. I mean, this is the most top-notch equipment. And, to throw a couple ballpark and figures out there, I mean, I've probably put in the last 10 years between $1 million to $3 million worth of finances just in equipment.
That ain't chump change, man. That's a lot of scratch.
It's a lot of scratch. And, guys, I'll be honest, I got a funny story for you. A lot of these machines and equipment that I was buying was coming from pharmaceutical companies that were selling it on the low liquidation sales.
So you're surfing Craigslist for old pharma equipment is what you're saying?
Pretty much.
It is on Let It Go.
You got to use your natural resources, right? I'm in the Mecca. I'm in Southern California. I have some of the biggest companies in the world out here, and they tend to liquidate some things here and there. So I was able to look up some pharma companies that were having some liquidation, and I was able to purchase some equipment. And equipment is a big deal, guys. That's the way of the future. That's I got to have the best equipment to have the best product. And
well, so you're talking about inputs and outputs, right? The machine is the thing that translates the input, which is the biomass. Does the biomass matter, or is, when it comes to the oils, educate me. Why does the biomass matter? And you guys are not vertically integrated. You don't grow your own. So where are you getting your biomass from?
Yep. Good questions. So the biomass, this industry has been built on relationship, and then you guys know that from, hearing from many people in this industry. I've developed some really strong relationships in Northern California I've been in this industry for probably the greater 20 years now. I say between around 1999 to 2000 when I first started getting my feet wet. But along those years, I've developed strong relationships with these farmers that have now, made the turn to go legal. Some have it and some have, don't get me wrong. There's still a lot up in the Northern California area where there's still Wild West. But, a lot of the guys that I work with in the Northern California region have made the turn over to legal. And along those ways, I've allowed to just, continue a long-term relationship with these guys. And that's a big deal for my brand. When you start looking at these brands and you start looking at, what they stand for and what they do and who their operators are, I think that's the biggest deal is, the management team's a big deal is because, if I didn't have these relationships and I had to cultivate these on day one, we wouldn't be getting the prices or the love that we get. We have a vast Rolodex, and not a lot of people get to, talk about the Rolodex because a lot of people keep that private. But the thing with Gen X is we have a very strong Rolodex in Northern California, and our biomass Rolodex is just immense. Like I can get us, a large amount of biomass. So that's something big, and that was something big for the investors as well because they understand that, some investment. I'm talking guys, I'll spend anywhere from $1 million to $3 million on just buying raw material.
How often?
To keep the machines going, probably every other month, probably every 60, 90 days.
Wow. That is a lot of product.
Yeah.
What's interesting is this extraction business. I don't think a lot of people are going to see companies like my company, Gen X. They're going to come from the side really quick and really fast. We are the anomaly, guys. We are able to turn our doors and open our doors and just start literally pumping oil out of that facility.
Are you buying the same strain from each of the different farmers, or are you blending it? Are we looking at hybrids? I mean, how does the consistency work? Because you talked about wanting to make Gen X both a national, a 50-state brand, and then eventually an international brand. When you buy a Tylenol in New York or in Dubai, it's exactly the same. So, and that's a function of inputs, right? So are you working with the farmers that you're buying your biomass from to say, okay, I want Gorilla Glue 4 or I want OG Kush or whatever it is? Are you really consistent in what you're buying?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Lewis. There's a couple ways to look at that. The consistency is king. That really has to do with our formulations. Gen X is really strong on formulations. That's our bread and butter. That's what I pride our business on is being able to have a consistent product through and through. I mean, when you pick up that Gen X product, you know exactly what you're getting every time. And that was like our biggest testament to this industry was, staying at a commercialization level, but be able to keep that quality. And the quality is important because, like you said, the Advil is the same as it is in New York as it is in California. That's formulations. That's your in-house biochemist that you have formulating your product. And, a little bit about Gen X is Gen X takes pride in that. We have an in-house, chemical engineer that has built SOPs for our brand to establish that if I move to New York or Washington or Florida, that I will be making the same Gen X pen there as I would in California. And the reason being is, you got to break the products down to multiple different levels, right? Like you have your sauce and distillate carts, you have your rosin cart, you have a distillate with just terpenes cart. So there's multiple different products, right? So along those ways, those products have to be built and made as well. So that sauce I have to get that sauce from a specific farmer that's pesticide free, that has that triangle OG or that tangy OG or that pineapple express. So going back to the question of, do you work with the farmers to get the same amount of, products and flavors, et cetera? Yes. That's a really big deal in our relationships, is that we've secured farms that have these products that we'll be able to have on our shelf and continually have on our shelf, because, we go in at the very first start of these farms and we work with the farmers to understand the genomics of the plant, to understand the terpene profiles, because we're extracting those terpene profiles to be pulled out and to be reintroduced in the product. So all of our pens, when you look at our distillate and our sauce pens, that's distillate plus sauce. So that's a full spectrum product. But when you look at our product that's distillate with, pineapple terpenes, that's not fake flavoring. That's cannabis derived terpenes. So I just wanted that to be clear. When we go to these farms, we're also sourcing terpenes as well. How do I get the best terpene profiles? Well, you got to work with the best growers. You got to match all these things up, and that's kind of where you look to us as being this industry leader of having these relationships. That's where I see us having a big advantage compared to all our competitors. We have the Rolodex, we have the understanding of how to extract it all, and we put these great quality products on the marketplace, and everybody loves them. We've got great feedback.
Shea, before we jump into, I want to get back into your early relationships in a second here, but can you explain what sauce is? I think there's still a good part of the country that's in unregulated markets and may not fully understand what that type of product is. So
or resin or any of the other stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah,
absolutely. So there's many facets of the business. You have a rosin, which it's been kind of the new wave right now. Rosin is a solvent-free extraction. And with rosin, you have its introduction is heat. So they're using high pressure plates with like 18,000 pounds of pressure, and they're squeezing the buds. And with that squeezing pressure and heat, it is pushing out the resin from the plant, which is what your oil, your hash rosin would come out. So you have hash rosin. Then you have sauce. Sauce is a high terpene profile extract, and what sauce is that most of the time sauce is done in a closed loop system, and what sauce is a full spectrum product. So you have all the cannabinoids, you have all the flavors, you get the full spectrum of sauce, and I like the sauce carts because that is the most connoisseur smoking-esque. I mean, rosin carts are very new wave to the marketplace. I don't think a lot of people have experienced rosin.
And do you need a special vape pen for it, or can it work on any pen?
Well, there are certain pens that work better. It's all about the aperture of the air going through the pen, and a lot of the cartridges that we use are all stamped and approved for the new regulated market coming here soon. And it's it's an interesting question you say that, Lewis, because the big deal is you got to put the best quality product out there as an oil, but we also have to match it with the best quality hardware. And I think hardware is going to be a big deal here for a lot of other brands in the marketplace that haven't put as much effort into understanding the regulations coming through. Is a lot of cartridges have heavy metals. A lot of these terpenes will strip the copper and the metaling off these products, and this is some stuff that I know because I've been in the vaporizer industry for the greater part of 10 years now. So I understand how these are made. I understand the internals of these products, and I think that's where you're going to see a lot of articles coming out like terpenes are melting the plastic away, or terpenes are stripping the metals and heavy metal contaminants in these products. And I think that's the way of the future, is being ahead of those curves, not falling in those pitfalls, because we already foresee it coming.
When we were in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and as we said at the top of the show, Shea is a client. Shea, you were at the Benzinga show. I got to overhear you having a conversation with a hardware manufacturer about the issues of the different oil substrates. Like, because when you extract from the cannabis plant, you then have to mix that oil with something else, and sometimes it's coconut oil or other things. Does that make a difference? Do those types of I don't know if it's a binding agent or whatever you call it, do those matter?
Absolutely. That's a great question. There's a lot of products in the marketplace right now that are using like what you would consider maybe a cutting agent. A cutting agent being an MCT oil, a PG, or a propylene glycol. These are all agents that a lot of these companies are using to just cut down the product a little bit. And I don't know if it's for reasons of the cartridges they're using or whatnot, but, that's a big deal. Gen X has taken pride in not being a business that has done that. A lot of our product is full 100% cannabis derived. So nothing inside that product has any propylene glycols. Nothing has been cut inside with coconut oil or MCT. And I think that's a big deal because as, we're in these regulated markets, people like the FDA are always looking at consumable products, et cetera. And I think it's an interesting time to be alive through this, revolution that, we are pioneering these products without these in it. And I know that's because there's going to be a lot of other products in the marketplace that have it in there. And it's more or less, I think, more of a profiteering thing than it is for the cartridges. But the reality is Gen X products have been wholesome. We don't use any of the cutting agents, and back to our formulations. Our formulations is everything. We take really pride on our formulated products, and I think that's what stands the test of time.
So we've covered a lot of the actual products that Gen X makes, but your role as CEO is something I think that's a little bit new for you. You've been a lot on the branding side, but you've never been the CEO of a public company before, and you're currently going through that RTO process right now with Gen X. What's been the most surprising thing to you that you've learned through this process? How has this experience been for you?
Experience has been great, man. I've got very great partners. I've got great solid people around me like you guys, Lewis and Nick, and it's been a great experience. I'm a businessman. I like to look at myself as an entrepreneur, and I think what's interesting, guys, is that a lot of people use that term entrepreneurship very loosely. I think it's very important. When you put your name on a product, it's who you are. It's your last name. That's all you have. And I think along this way, I've driven head first into this. I had no expectations. I had no experience of running a publicly traded company. I don't have any of those, but I do have good work ethic and I have morals. And I think when you lead with that in your business, it transpires down to your employees. And I think it's about building your management team. I have solid people around me, and my experience has been great.
Has there been something that's really surprised you? I mean, you're spending, your background is working with farmers and finding distribution channels or partners for your product, finding the right employees, but now you're dealing with investors. Has there been a question that you've been asked that you went, I never anticipated that question? Or like, what has been the most surprising thing about the investment process? Because a lot of the people who are listening here either are investors themselves or thinking about getting involved with a public company. And you are one of the unique cats in this space who is, you're learning how to be a public company CEO as you're preparing to be a public company CEO. So has there been something that you have experienced or learned that you like, I really wish I knew that 8 months ago or 5 months ago?
Yeah, I like I said, this last year has been a lot of, guys, every night I'm at home studying before I go to bed, trying to learn something new about, the public marketplace. And, there hasn't been too many things that have left me in awe, but what's interesting is to really see the amount of financial capital being poured into this industry, and there's not enough of me's, right? There's not enough of guys like me that have been in this industry that are business savvy enough to understand that, hey, this is a regulated marketplace, and if I can pull my business and my Rolodex together, this can expand over 50 states and then even international. And I think, that's where I become more of the anomaly. And I think, I'm telling other investors, what do you look for when you go look at these companies? You really have to understand who the guy is and who I am and what I've done in this industry, what my credibility is, what my track record is, what other brands in this marketplace say about me. I'm affiliated with some of the top 5 biggest companies in California. And I believe LA marketplace will be the leaders of, the all United States. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on Northern California. That's where it's all grown, but all the brands are born in LA, and there's a lot of people moving and shaking in LA, and every day you have to stay relevant, and every day, people talk, and I think it's just important that for these investors, I see a lot of investors getting involved, and they get they go in and they buy this equipment that they don't know nothing about. They did a little bit of research online, but online research isn't the same as, test and proven research and things that I've endured and pitfalls and money and finances that I've gone through. So I think it's really falls on, who's the heart and soul of the operations of the business? Like, who is that? And, that's really what you're putting your money on, and a lot of people always, so what's that saying, Lewis, that we talked about, are they betting on the horse or are they betting on the jockey, And I think the reality is like, you got to have solid people in this marketplace, because there's a lot of investors getting involved that are buying out of the box, extraction systems that have just poured in like so much money that they're not going to get out of it because they didn't buy the right system. It was maybe easy for them to operate where they only had to push one or two buttons, but it's not the right piece of equipment to get the numbers to scale to where you need it to go. And I think, it's, to answer your question, I think that's kind of, where we're at with, Gen X being, having test and proven, being in the marketplace, maybe not on a public side, we haven't, but, from the emerging industry that we're coming out of, we have all the tools in our tool belt.
You've been in the industry for almost 20 years, and you've become something. It's funny. It took 20 years for you to become an overnight success, right? But there have been moments, I'm sure there have been moments over the last 2 decades that you went, oh my God, I just made the biggest freaking mistake ever, and that's going to kill this business. Can you talk about one of those oh shit moments and maybe a lesson that you learned that you've been able to apply so that you don't make that same mistake? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here. It could be anything. Anything, man.
Yeah,
like it's like literally, you talk about the soul of this entrepreneur, right? Like, not everybody can be an entrepreneur, but the essence of entrepreneurship is failing, picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, saying, I realize why I failed and I'm not doing that again. So give us one of them. What is that oh shit moment? Like, oh my God, I just drove this company off the cliff and then you saved it. Like, what was that moment?
I'll be honest with you guys. So, earlier part of 2016, I started Gen X, and I started Gen X. I had a terpene company, and the terpene company was something that I thought was going to be really revolutionary. I thought, there's so many pen companies out there. I'm going to start a company that just focuses on the terpenes and the science. And so along those ways, I realized that I was too early to the marketplace. I had poured all these resources, all these finances into a project that was just not there yet. There was no education. The marketplace wasn't ready. I was too early to the dance. And it's funny because, I had some negotiations and potential sales of that company back then, and I short sold them really, really, really soon, but I look back at it, that's kind of what has pushed me to go to where I'm at now, because at that time the emerging market wasn't moving that fast. The legalization wasn't really it wasn't in full swing. Cities like Santa Ana and LA were just barely giving out their first licenses. So I just thought at that time, oh shit, fuck, I have this business. I've invested all this money, IP, time, research, all this into it. And at that time was really the inception of Gen X. It really was you know what? It's not going to go by the wayside. You're just too soon. You're just too early to the marketplace. And that was a really oh shit moment for me then, because I'll be honest, I took grandfather, my grandfather was one of the oldest investors in cannabis. He was 98 years old.
Wow.
And
you shook down your 98-year-old grandfather for a weed company?
The man's trying to raise money, man.
I need to get some money for my weed company, and he just was like, son, I love you. You always make good decisions. And I think if this is where your heart is, I'm like, this is where my heart is. I just knew it was one of those oh shit moments. Fuck, I got to pivot. And when I make this pivot, it's all in. And, going back to being an entrepreneur, that's it. Being all in is everything. When you say it, you say it. You're in. That's not a loose term for me. I'm a man of my word. I'm Italian. I'm a family guy. That was it. And, that was that oh shit moment of I got grandpa's money riding on it too. And that's always been an inside joke with me and some of my partners, because when we were looking at that potential sale, I had a name listed on there as unknown. And the people buying the company were like, well, who is unknown? I'm like, just doesn't matter. Just, you got to pay that person off. They're earliest seed investor. Like unknown was my grandfather. So.
All right, let's talk about the black market for a minute, because this is a topic that I know you've been pretty passionate about. You've spoken in the past about how there's unregulated or some of these non-compliant brands, especially in California, that are profiting off the black market or the gray market as it currently is. And you've taken an interesting sales approach when, there's a lot of brands that are just like pushing all their stuff out there, trying to get all the consumer eyeballs. You took this approach of pulling back a lot of Gen X products from different stores that you thought maybe could be operating unlicensed or just may not be good actors in the space. Talk about why you decided to make that move right now, and just kind of what the current gray market status is in California.
Absolutely. The gray market, the black market is thriving. It's sad to say there's just not a lot of educational out there for these people to understand the difference. What we took pride in with Gen X was always being compliant. Like I said, our product was pesticide free since 2016. That was something we took pride in. And with that being said, over the last about year and a half or so, we've pulled back a lot of our products from unregulated, deliveries or dispensaries that were working in the black market. And the reason being for that is, I want to be a leader and pioneer of this, white market. And, with regulation stepping in, I realized the only way for us to really do that was to make the clear distinction between the two. And it's tough because, don't get me wrong, guys, my investors look at top line revenues and I have to report to them on our top line revenue. But when the top line revenue decreases by 30, 40, 50% because you pulled your product out of, a good amount of stores that are unregulated, you start to get a little worried. But, the reality is, we're here to stay, we're here to, weather the storm through the unregulated market to the above ground market. And with that being said, we had to take the first step by only putting our products in regulated markets. And, like I said, top line revenue was affected by it because you saw a big drastic decrease in sales. But, as the regulated market grows and grows and continues to grow, and as the Bureau continues to give out new licenses, et cetera, you can see this market starting to, really grow at a good rate. But, you're right, though. We've taken a little bit of a haircut, from our product sales standpoint. But I think it's a good move for us because it shows the marketplace that you can only get Gen X products in licensed stores.
And you're going to be a publicly listed company, so you need to be completely on the up and up.
Well, expand on that. Like, because California is a legal market, I think in most people's understandings of the legal recreational market, they should be able to go into a store and be able to buy cannabis. How does this gray market exist? How are these businesses able to operate without these licenses, and where's the enforcement? Why is there why is the consumer confused by what is regulated and what's not?
That's another good question. To be honest with you, there's not a lot of education out there for the consumer to understand the difference. I mean, the consumer looked on the TV and saw Prop 64 pass, so now cannabis is legal, right? But there was no justification between the delivery that's delivering you a legal product and a delivery that's delivering you legal product. There's no way for any consumer to really understand that. And I think that's where there needs to be some education that has to come through. And that's, it's got to come from the top down, maybe an educational platform of, the interesting thing is you start looking at these local municipalities, they're all a little bit different too. The state of California says that weed's legal, and under Prop 64, cannabis is legal, but there's a lot of cities like Beverly Hills, Laguna Beach, a lot of these really, really, really high per capita areas that are.
Let's just call them bougie, shall we?
Bougie, yeah, they're very bougie areas that just they're still stuck in the ways of they don't want that riffraff, right? When the reality is like they're just little local, municipalities that are trying to govern their own little municipality city. And, to be honest with you, it's causing a lot of, disruption, because there are a lot of people that need this as medicine. I mean, guys, a big part of my background was I grew cannabis for cancer patients. And that's a big deal for me, is the medicine standpoint. There's a good friend of mine. His name was Luke the Brave. He was very influential in this industry. A lot of people knew him. My friend Chris from G-Pen was good friends with him. My buddy Jared from West Coast Cure was good friends with him. We all were really close with this kid because he had cancer, and he had a disease called EB where his skin wouldn't attach to the muscles. So it would just float, and he was always in pain, right? So I would make him RSOs. I would grow him the CBD. I would make him shatters. He liked to medicate with dabs. We made him vape pens. And I mean, like, these are the people that really need the medicine. So when you talk about municipalities passing judgment on if they want cannabis in their city for riffraff, like, that's just selfish. I think every city should have an ordinance, and every city should be able to control and govern that, just like they do the water company, just like they do all these other companies. Like, there should be no difference. And we're seeing there's a lot of fight in a lot of little cities in the Southern California region that are dealing with these problems. But it's like a roadblock for people to get medicine. For instance, if Luke passed, rest in peace, he passed away, but if he was still around to this day, he couldn't get in the car and go drive. He'd have to have a caregiver come to him. So hopefully he's not living in Beverly Hills or Laguna Beach or any of these cities that aren't passing ordinances for local deliveries to let people get the medicine they need.
As an OG, as a guy who's been in the space for a very long time, and guys on both sides of the line, guys who are like working in the regulated legal market, you have plans on going public, you are a CEO, and then I'm sure you still have friends who are on the other side of the line who are looking at you going, now how are they looking at you? Are they looking at you with like, oh man, he made it, or he sold out?
It's funny. I got a couple people looking at it both ways, but a lot of these guys are like, man, you're crazy to be putting your neck on the line like that. And I go, man, I'm not crazy when I put my neck on the line for what I believe in, and at the end of the day, like, that's the true testament of why Gen X has become so successful, is because everybody that works on board with Gen X believes in what we do. That's like, and that comes from the top down. I like to, like, everybody's like, oh, you're the boss, or you're a boss, or you're this. No, I'm not a boss. I'm a leader. Okay. And there's a big difference. A boss tells people what to do. A leader shows people what to do. And, I've been a leader in this industry for a long time now. And that's my testament, and that's my honorhood to this industry. I'm a statesman for cannabis. And along those ways, there's got to be leaders like myself that are not afraid to grow cannabis for my friend Luke the Brave, who I was growing illegal CBD for back in the day. Like, the pure joy I got by just helping others through cannabis is what I do it for. And, yes, I do like to make a livelihood of this. And yes, I do like to make a lot of money one day. But along the ways, you have to do everything for the right reasons. And I feel like that's what I tell my friends. And they're like, oh, are you worried about doing that article on LA Times? And like, aren't you worried about doing this? I'm like, not really, because everything I'm saying is true. I live and breathe and sleep what I do. Like, that's who I am. Like, if I didn't do that, maybe I'd be worried. And maybe if I was lying, I'd be worried, but I'm not. And I think that's the difference. But yeah, I do see a lot of the guys that have like snickered and looked at me as like, oh, you're just like a cannabis dealer and you own dispensaries. And now they're looking at me with a stock ticker and they're like, oh my gosh, you got any tips? Can I get in? I forget, don't get me wrong. I'll forgive and I'll forget, but it's kind of hard to see those guys in our space, trying to rub elbows with you, and you see him at the Benzinga, or you see him at the Capitol conference, or you see him somewhere and you're like, man, you were the same guy that was passing judgment on me like 4 or 5 years ago.
You're about to make a lot of money. And maybe it's the first time in your life that you're going to be worth bank. Have you thought about what you want to do with your life beyond Gen X? You're going to have, you're going to be the CEO of a cannabis company, and at some point you're going to either make or be worth millions and millions of dollars, life-changing money. How is it going to change your life?
That's a great question, man. You know what? Like, my biggest thing that I've always tried to be in my life is just real and true in who I am. I don't care if you got 100 million or you got $5. I'm still going to treat you the same way. And it's funny you say that, Lewis. I've had quite a few people come out of the woodworks when they've read like LOIs and things that have been put out there. And it's funny, you know, like I said, I could forgive and forget. Like I'm one to hold judgment if you like took my lunch in 6th grade, you know what I mean? But the funny thing is like,
and by the way, that's really funny knowing how big you are today. There's nobody taking your lunch today.
yeah, I'll be honest, nobody ever has, but I just use that as an example. But, you know, you're right. You know, I think here's the thing is that I think it's important to be true to who you are. And, you know, yeah, I'm very thankful. I'm very humbled. Every day I just continue to stay humble. I think that's my biggest key to success is staying humble and staying grounded. And I think that's important because I don't want people to look at me any different between the amount of zeros I have, you know, after this is said and done. I want people to look and respect me for who I was, you know, before and after. And, you know, with that being said, I think, you know, I'm excited. I want to build a legacy. I really do. I want to build a legacy in this cannabis space. I want to be known for being the pioneer from the Southern California area that has dodged bullets, that has, you know, dipped and dived from operations, that have, you know, stood the test of time, that has done it for the better, greater part of cannabis. And with that being said, when I do make these monies and start reinvest back into my industry, et cetera, I'll do that along the way. And I'll do charitable things that will help, you know, other people that have been just as passionate. I think there needs to be established programs in our industry that help people, you know, get involved with this, and no better people than somebody that has already been successful in this industry, you know?
Couldn't agree more. Love the energy. Love the very refreshing take you're giving, Shea. You've been really gracious with your time. We just have a couple more questions. Where I want to make sure we hit on is that so Gen X, you talked about your background is LA. Your guys' products are available in the SoCal region. But what's the plan for expanding beyond that area? When are we going to start seeing those products in NorCal? When are we going to see them in other legal markets like Oregon, Nevada, Massachusetts? Talk about what's next for Gen X.
Great questions. You know, I just want it to be clear that, you know, Gen X has been very hyper-focused on the Southern California region just because this is our back door. You know, our facility is being under construction in the Long Beach area. So we'll be able to service the greater part of LA. And, you know, I think there's a lot of business that can be done here. But, you know, future expansion with Gen X, we have a lot of opportunities on the line. You know, we have opportunity to expand in Massachusetts and vertically integrate with a building out there that will be able to do large cultivation. You know, it's like 30,000 square feet of cultivation. So, you know, these are some things on the pipeline for us. We also have some opportunity in Florida, Detroit, Michigan, you know, and Nevada as well. So these are areas that we're going to venture off into, but I just want it to be known that we're super hyper focused on the Southern California region right now. And as operations start to expand, you know, you can look to see Gen X, you know, all across, you know, 50 states in the near future. We're just, you know, doing it strategically right now and just, you know, we're building the blocks of the corporate structure back home and just continue to grow.
Well, I think that just means I got to get a flight out to LA so I can get me some Gen X products. Isn't that right, Lewis?
Absolutely.
Yes. There. I agreed to fly you to LA, but I didn't say when.
All right. It's all right. I can go hang out with Ann. It'll be cool.
To have you guys out there. Come take a walk through the facility as we're doing construction or when it gets close to finish, you know.
Next time for sure. Yes.
All right, Shea. So, last question for you today. Well, you've listened to the podcast, so you know this one's coming. We have the ongoing segment of while you were sleeping.
Seeping.
Or
depends on what's seeping out of where.
It's been a long day. All right. But Shea, tell us the one thing that you think that's missing in the press or like the public doesn't understand about cannabis. So, and if you're picking up the LA Times, what's the story that you want to read on the cannabis industry that you're not seeing?
You guys are stumping me with this question. But, I think the biggest thing that I would like to see on the LA Times is just how cannabis is positively enhancing people's lives more. I want to see more of the testimonies from the people that have been in the shadows for a long time. I think there's a lot of users out there that have been using this cannabis for a medicine for a long time and haven't been able to be open about it. And I think, we need more people like that are willing to step out and say, hey, I've been using cannabis longer than you think I have, and this has helped me do this, this, and this. And I think there's so many more stories out there about cannabis that aren't being talked about. This plant's been suppressed for hundreds of years. It was medicine. I've seen photos in the 1900s with, it says cannabis sativa and cannabis indica, and they were, like probably RSO oils that, some doctor made way back in the day. But, the reality is I see, it's got a voice. This plant speaks to us, and I want us to all be able to hear it, and I want us to all listen, and, that'd be my biggest thing.
Yeah, I second that. And on top of it, I want to make sure that the artwork is respectful of that as well, because I feel like a lot of times the artwork that gets associated, even with some of these cannabis positive stories, still has somebody smoking a joint, which already has a negative connotation to it, or has like these psychedelic effects on the image, which I think, as much as the story's still positive, it still gives the reader that initial, like, this is a sin drug type look. Yeah. So.
I mean, it'd be pretty cool to see, like, some congressman standing in front of the Capitol with a joint in his mouth. Maybe it's not lit, but it'd be pretty cool just to see him standing there with it, right?
Can't do it on federal property, but yes, that would be cool.
Man, you know what I mean? Like maybe out on the street or something in front of it. I don't know.
All right, man. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate you guys.
A special thanks to Shea Alderete, our friend and CEO of Gen X Biosciences. To find out more about them, you can go to their website, which is Gen X, GENX, biosciences.com, or to follow them and see amazing photography on Instagram, go to @genxtech.com. To chat with us or to send us emails, or you can send me hate mail. Shoot us an email at greenrush@kcsa.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @the_greenrush, or on Instagram, and the handle is @thegreenrush_podcast. And I'll tell you something. That's one damn take, Shea. And I don't mean Shea Alderete. That's one take.
Cannabis.